Hi everyone, welcome to our research presentation. We are Group 5, and my name is Sebastian Chinen. I am the report writer, and I am in charge of theory. My partner for this presentation is Christian Saldana, and he is the econometrician. The name of our research paper is Recessionary Saving, an analysis of the personal saving rate. The structure of this presentation will follow the format of the research paper very closely. We will begin with the introduction, in which we specify the significance of our topic, as well as go over our literary review. Then we will cover the relevant theory and how these theories contribute to our hypothesis. After, we will cover econometrics. In this section, we will go over the important variables of our model, the control and experiment group, testing procedure, and our results. Finally, we will provide our conclusion, where we explain our key takeaways. As I will explain in the following slides, the personal saving rate is an important metric in developing the economy. This prompted us to ask the following question: does a decrease in real income and consumer confidence during a financial recession result in an increase in the personal saving rate? Our hypothesis is that the personal saving rate does indeed increase when a recessionary cycle occurs, as consumer confidence and income are two important factors in determining how much a consumer is willing to spend and save during a given recessionary period. A country's long-term economic growth is dependent on the saving rate, as it allows capital to flow towards investment opportunities that innovate and generate more goods and services. The personal savings rate is a subgroup of the country's aggregate saving rate. This rate informs us about the income that remains after expenditures are made in a household. This is also a measure of a consumer's confidence in the economy, as they feel more comfortable spending when the economy is stable or growing. Despite its importance, since 1984, Americans have averaged a personal savings rate of less than 10%, and it was about 7% in 2016. The graphic to the right compares the saving rate of 20 countries. It shows the US in the light green bar in 12th place in the year 2016. Economists such as Zhong Wang have theorized that despite the positive short-term effect of a low savings rate, in the long run there may be insufficient investment capital to sustain long-run economic growth without heavy dependence on foreign capital. Furthermore, in the recessionary periods that were observed in our data collection, unemployment grew and consumer spending dropped as people experienced lower income from loss of assets in capital markets or because of layoffs. This naturally causes the personal savings rate to rise in a time where spending would greatly assist a struggling economy. For these reasons, we believe that understanding the factors that affect the personal saving rate is very important for economic prosperity. The following papers that we reviewed were pivotal in determining which factors we would analyze in our model and what potential issues some factors may have in accurately representing the saving rate. A research report titled Saving in the United States, How Has It Changed and Why It Is Important, states that how much we save as a nation has significant consequences for the economy. Because we are saving less, we rely on importing resources from abroad. This, in turn, contributes to the U.S. trade deficit. Next, the paper Discussing Economic Factor Effect on Personal Savings Rate by Zhong Wang found that the factors that were important in determining the personal saving rate included the interest rates, the ratio of workers to retirees, housing and stock market booms, and social security tax. Interestingly, there is an inverse relationship between the personal saving rate and the stock market/housing booms. This is an important factor to consider, as the present paper will consider financial recessions which have been partially, if not primarily, caused by a strong downturn of the stock market or the housing market. The paper The Long-Run Relationship Between the Personal Savings Rate and Consumer Sentiment, they found that consumer sentiment and interest rates were major factors in revealing the health of the economy. They also derived that consumer sentiment and real income had an inverse relationship with personal savings rate. These ties between consumer outlook and real disposable income served as another basis for our independent variables in our model. In the paper, Estimating the Marginal Propensity to Consume Using the Distributions of Income, Consumption, and Wealth, they found that household wealth is tied to a household's saving rate. They also used a heterogeneous agent model to find that lower wealth households that suffered an income loss would save more than their wealthier counterparts. In a report titled Consumers and the Economy, Part 1, Lansing discusses the issues in the measurement of the personal saving rate. By investigating the historical changes made by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, it was concluded that limiting income to a fraction of total after tax income may cause an underestimation of the personal saving rate. This means that the personal saving rate reported by the BEA might not be entirely precise. Next, we want to discuss the relevant theory. Keynesian economics state that consumer spending is dependent on income and marginal propensity to consume. This is outlined by the expression consumer spending equals autonomous consumption plus marginal propensity to consume times real disposable income. However, there is also a competing hypothesis championed by Milton Friedman called the permanent income hypothesis. This states that people will spend money at a level consistent with their expected long-term average income. This is outlined by the equation measured income equals permanent income plus transitionary income. In other words, if a household's disposable income grew or dropped in a short period of time, their spending habits would remain unaffected, as they would only consider the long-term change to their income as being indicative of their spending. Currently, the new Keynesian model is the standard used by central banks and policy institutions to counter recessions. This tool is informative as it shows fluctuations in economic activity and inflation. This shows the importance of Keynesian economics in forming policy. Furthermore, while the permanent income hypothesis is a better long-term indicator of economic progress, it is not highly relevant when analyzing a shorter period of time, i.e., a recessionary period. Furthermore, our hypothesis is supported by Keynesian economics, as a drop in disposable income from either unemployment or lower household income should cause a household to save more. Lastly, one of the pillars of economic assumptions is that consumers act rationally. If a consumer expected their own financial situation to worsen, such as during a recessionary period, this would cause their consumption confidence to drop and subsequently their personal saving would increase.
Econometrics. Our independent variables include the unemployment rate, consumer confidence index, real household income, and federal funds rate. Our dependent variable is the personal savings rate. The unemployment rate was one of the factors considered because economic theory postulates that as the unemployment rate increases, consumer spending decreases and subsequently drives up personal saving. We also recognize that it is an underlying contributor to other factors in our study. The Consumer Confidence Index was also considered because economic evidence suggests that when consumers' outlook of the economy is pessimistic, their spending habits seem to change by spending less and saving more. We also consider the fact that it could be influenced by other overlying variables in our study. Real household income was used in our study of the personal savings rate because common economic intuition says that the less a household generates in income, the more they save in case of rainy days. Including this factor was controversial based on debates in the field of how to measure household income. We chose the federal funds rate as an independent variable because economic theory posits that changes in interest rates affects the way individuals invest or save. Since the Fed funds rate is the basis for most interest rates, we thought it would be prudent to include it in our research models. And finally, our research question asks, how does the personal savings rate change or behave during a normal economic environment compared to times of economic recession, and how and what factors might influence it during these different economic states? Methodology. Step 1. The data. The first step in conducting our research was finding reliable and expansive data to run our regression models. Most of our data was sourced from government agencies, while a few were gathered from other credible organizations. Step 2. Preliminary tests. Step 2 involved running a regression with all our unfiltered raw data to see whether we could pinpoint any trends, patterns, or abnormalities in our initial results. After analyzing the results, we refined our data and models to best reflect our research question. Step 3. Multiple linear regression analysis. Once we had our data set, we ran a number of regressions to test the significance of our variables and our models. Step 4. The results. After our regression analysis, we compared our results between our treatment group and our experimental group to answer our research question in an effort to accept or reject the null hypothesis that the personal savings rate behaves differently during times of recession. The data. We retrieved our personal savings rate data our unemployment rate data, and our Fed funds rate data through the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's Fed website. Our personal savings rate data was sourced from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, which spans over several decades, originated from 1960, with a sample size of 741 monthly. Our unemployment rate data was sourced from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, which also spans several decades, dating back to as early as 1948, with a sample size of 874 monthly. The Fed funds rate data was sourced from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, with a sample size of 796 monthly. Our Consumer Confidence Index data was retrieved from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD. This data also spans several decades, originating from 1960, with a sample size of 730 monthly. And finally, our real household income data was sourced from the U.S. Census Bureau, with a negligible sample size of 36 annual. Preliminary tests. Our initial test consisted of taking our broad raw data and running a regression. We found that our initial model performed very poorly due to a low R-squared. Half of our variables were statistically insignificant and did not make economic sense according to their beta coefficients and p-values. We also pinpointed some overarching trends in some factors, which were backed up by their significance in our initial regression. However, we do not have enough confidence to say anything concrete from these initial results. In an attempt to refine our data, we regressed every variable in our model against the dependent variable to gauge each variable's significance and explanatory power. In all but one variable were they significant and had a high R-squared. The variable that was insignificant and displayed a very low R-squared was our real household income variable. We attested this result to its heavily inconsistent and often highly debated measurement, its efficacy in predicting changes in the personal savings rate, and the lack of observations in our data sample size. Multiple linear regression. After refining our data and updating our variables, we created a control group and a treatment group. We took only the data that covered the 3 most recent recessions to control for economic, structural, and behavioral changes in the U.S. economy. We tested whether there was a difference in these variables between the two economic states and whether they influenced the personal savings rate in a significant way. The results. Our beta coefficients made economic sense, for the most part. Both Fed funds rate and unemployment rate variables displayed positive relationships with a dependent variable, while our consumer confidence variable displayed an inverse relationship with our dependent variable. 2/3 of our variables were statistically significant. Both the Fed funds rate and unemployment rate were statistically significant, while the consumer confidence variable was not, with a p-value greater than 0.01 or 1%. Our model's R-squared values were also very high. For example, Model 1A's R-squared was 0.5559, or 55.59%. Models 1B R-squared was 0.6418, or 64.18%. In addition, our model's statistics reinforce our model's effectiveness in explaining the variation in our dependent variable. Model 1A's f-stat was 23.37, while its p-value was very small. Model 1B's f-stat was 19.711, with an also very small p-value. In conclusion, we can safely say with a reasonable degree of certainty that the personal savings rate is affected and correlated by and with the unemployment rate and Fed funds rate. Our main conclusions. The unemployment rate, federal funds rate were statistically significant and confirmed our expectations and validated the economic literature. The real household income variable was not useful in our model due to several dubious reasons, which could invalidate or cast doubt on our findings. We accept our null hypothesis that the personal savings rate is affected more by our refined variables in recessionary periods. Some flaws in our research included the real household income variable, which needs a more robust and sensical measurement that truly reflects household wealth. Our household income data was annual, causing sample size problems. Maybe expanding our data could help with that problem. Our research was based on strong assumptions about rational individuals' behavior in terms of saving. Another final flaw is that the magnitudes of consumer confidence in different recessions might be different. Future considerations for our research include redesigning our regression model to get a better and bigger picture of the personal savings rate. Areas of further study include inclusion of a better measure of real household wealth, substitution of federal funds rate for interest rate in a 10-year bond, and finally, to expand the dataset to include more recessionary periods, such as in the 1980s and 1990s. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Thank you.